Hey, if you have a Bible, would you open it with me to James chapter 5? James chapter 5 is where we're going to be today. If you are new or you're visiting with us this morning, we want to welcome you. We're about to close out a series this week, and then next Sunday will be our final week in the series where we've been just walking through the letter of James, a letter written by James, the brother of Jesus, written specifically to the Jewish Christians who had been scattered throughout the known world at that time due to the threat of violence and persecution because of their faith. And we've sought to understand this letter under the big headline of pure religion, because at the end of chapter 1, James says, pure and undefiled religion before God is this, that we would look out for widows and orphans in their distress, and we would seek to keep ourselves unstained from the world. And so as we've taught this letter, we've looked at it through that lens, because James is just giving us very simple and practical instructions for how to live the Christian life, how to go about following Jesus in real time and space. And we've talked about this because it's really the heart of who we want to be as a church. We want to be a church that makes disciples of Jesus who will make disciples of Jesus. And its barest essence, the letter of James is Discipleship 101. James giving us these instructions so that we would look out for widows and orphans in their distress, so that we would learn to speak in a way that would reflect the glory and grace of God, that we wouldn't be contentious with our tongues or with our will, that we would recognize that much of the conflict in the world comes from within our own hearts. And then, as we've seen over the past 2 weeks, we would learn the difference between wisdom and foolishness, between pride and humility. And so now, as James closes this letter out, he kind of gets he gets very direct, borderline, dare I say, blunt, about the ways that pride can show up in our lives, specifically as it pertains to how we handle our money and wealth, what we do with the resources that God has entrusted to us. And so I'm just going to go ahead and give it to you straight. James is going to throw some haymakers here. He's a pastor, but he's coming with some heat today. He's writing to the church to urge them to live in this particular way, and especially to address what they're doing with money. So look with me, if you will, in James chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Come now, James says, you rich people, weep and wail over the miseries that are coming on you. Your wealth has rotted and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have stored up treasure in the last days. Look, the pay that you withheld from the workers who mowed your fields cries out, and the outcry of the harvesters has reached the ears of the Lord of armies. You have lived luxuriously on the earth and have indulged yourselves. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous who does not resist you. Therefore, brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts because the Lord's coming is near. Brothers and sisters, do not complain about one another so that you will not be judged. Look, the judge stands at the door. Brothers and sisters, take the prophets who spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering and patience. See, we count as blessed those who have endured. You have heard of Job's endurance and have seen the outcome that the Lord brought about. The Lord is compassionate and merciful. This is the word of the Lord. Every year about this time, especially last week when felt like you were standing on the surface of the sun when you went outside, it takes me back to a moment in my own life whenever I felt like I was going to die from heat exhaustion. I always go back to 2-a-day football practice in high school. Now, real quick, don't tune out. I'm not the guy who puts on his leather jacket to relive the glory days. I wasn't that great and our teams weren't that great. So my 2-a-day story is more about pain and misery, not high athletic achievements. But we would go back in Southeast Oklahoma. It was very similar weather to here, maybe a little bit hotter at times. And our 2-a-days would happen on the practice fields, which we would have to go to our locker room was a ways across campus. We'd have to do this long trek all the way across campus out to the practice fields. And in the morning, the first practice, there would be so much dew on the ground that it would soak through your shoes and your socks would be saturated. And then in the evening, all that dew would just be coming up from the ground, boiling underneath the surface, so that it felt like a sauna outside. And one of the things that made two-a-days really hard for me in high school was my high school football coach, to this day, is still probably the most intense and intimidating human I've ever met. He looked like if you asked AI to create a high school football coach, it would give you this man. Like, this is late 80s, early 90s, so he had the polyester bike coach shorts on. They were way too short for a grown man to be wearing. Can of snuff in the back pocket, chain smoking, and so, put the cigarette out, get a dip of snuff. And he had big bulging eyes that were very intense. And so when he spoke to you, it looked like he was staring into your soul. So 16, 17, 18-year-old me and every guy that I played football with was utterly terrified of this man. And so he would send us on this long trek from the locker room to the practice field, and we would have to go through stretching in anticipation of practice starting. And inevitably, somewhere amidst our stretching, it would kind of devolve into tomfoolery and nonsense, like happens with most high school guys. We start acting goofy or whatever. And he would show up and he would whistle. And not blow a whistle. He would do this thing that was, I can't do it. It would cut to the core of who you were as a human. It was so loud and ear piercing, and it felt like it could break your bones. And he would whistle, and we would all go immediately from goofing around to, we're about to die. Coach Harville's here. So everyone straightens up immediately, like, sir, yes, sir, tell us what to do. And I remember to this day, like if he walked in and whistled right now, you would see a different me emerge immediately. I would turn into a 15-year-old scared little boy. Whoa, what am I doing wrong? Like immediately go into panic mode. And I think about that whistle. And sometimes I think part of what's like wrong in the world today is there's not enough of those whistles. Like the thing that can get everyone straightened out like that, and everyone has to consider what they're doing with their life immediately when they hear it. Kind of this, oh no, I'm being watched. Judgment cometh. Like this is here. It's go time. And I think that when I read James 5, 1 through 11, I hear that whistle. Because James is doing that very thing. He's speaking with a level of severity. He's calling Christians the church. He says it here more than any other section. Brothers and sisters. He repeats it multiple times. And he's not speaking like a fiery preacher, fundamentalist. He's speaking as a pastor who says, look, you got to pay attention to what's happening to your financial lives. Discipleship, if it is to be discipleship, following Jesus, if it is to be pure and undefiled religion that looks out for widows and orphans, then you got to account for what you're doing with your wealth. You have to. And so when he gives that caveat to start, come now, you rich people, he's speaking to them the way he would speak to, I think, all of us. And in the Western world, in the late modern era, in the time where we find ourselves right now, I don't know your financial situation. I don't know if you're treading water, if you're barely making it, but I do know that in the West, in a capitalistic society such as the one we occupy, we all qualify as rich. We're usually not in a hand-to-mouth situation. We're probably not going to starve to death. And so the words that James has here applies, I think, to all of us. It's meant to sober us up, to consider, like we have been entrusted with resources. God, the creator of all things, is the giver of all good gifts, as James has already told us at the end of chapter 1. And so the things that we have are gifts. What are we doing with them? And if we don't examine that, and if we don't consider that, it'll be impossible for us to live the fullness of life that God intended followers of Jesus to live by exemplifying grace and compassion and mercy with the way that we handle our things. So I want to give you two things really quickly this morning from James 5, 1 through 11. The first is I'm going to look at the way that James addresses this warning and distill it down to the dangers of wealth. Wealth can be dangerous. It can corrupt the heart. It can take us under. This is not just James who says this, but James's brother Jesus, who said you can't serve both God and money. You got to make a decision. That's what James is pushing for, I think, here today. Look at these dangers. And then, fascinatingly, he holds it up to this other idea of the fruit of patience. How does the virtue of patience have something to say to the dangers of wealth? What does patience have to do with what we do with our money and our possessions? We'll see that here as well. The dangers of wealth and then the fruit of patience. Real quick, to really understand this section, I think we got to connect it back to what Derek fantastically preached on last week, the end of chapter 4 of James, where there James is kind of leaning into this idea, and he's kind of just carrying out that big theme to its conclusion. Remember last week, the theme was the difference between pride and humility. God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And one of the evidences of pride in our lives is what we do with our time and how we go about seeking to make more money. That showed up there at the end of chapter 4. Let me read those 2 verses to you real quick. Chapter 4, verse 13 and 14. James said, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such city and spend a year there and do business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you are like a vapor that appears for a little while, then vanishes." I think what James is talking about before he gets into directly addressing riches in the beginning of chapter 5, it shows up here. One of the dangers of wealth is what I call the danger of independence, of using wealth as a means to autonomy and to freedom, to be able to disassociate from others or from society, to be able to keep all your options open, to go where you want to go and do what you want to do. To see getting more wealth as a means to getting more supposed freedom for yourself. Now, that's kind of what wealth does, right? Wealth gives you more choices. It gives you more options. You can do add-ons and upgrades. Wealth gives you a cornucopia of things to choose from. And that's why we want more of it, because we get more stuff, right? And James says that can be a danger when that sets in on our souls and we begin to look at life as though the world is our oyster and we can get what we want. We got to be careful because wealth can deceive us in these ways. When I was a kid growing up, my family was a Taco Bell family. It was kind of a special treat. So if we went to Fort Smith, Arkansas, which was where the mall was, about an hour away from my house, there was a Taco Bell nearby, and that was the big treat. So this time of year, we'd do back to school shopping, and I'd get to go to Taco Bell. But I didn't get to get whatever I wanted at Taco Bell. In my day, Taco Bell had the 59 cent, 79 cent, and 99 cent menu, okay? And then there was this other stuff, like the Mexican pizza, which is still from above. The Nachos Bel Grande, which was grande, I know enough Spanish, Espanol, that means big, the big nachos. They had all the stuff on it. I didn't get to order any of those things. My mom would say when you go to Taco Bell, you can get one thing from the 59 cent menu, maybe one thing from the 79 cent menu, or just one thing from the 99 cent menu. And if you guys know this math, you could get a bean burrito and a meat nacho. That was the go-to combo if you were ordering in the way that we ordered. But I dreamt of the day when I was a big baller, when I was a high roller and I could get both a Nachos Bel Grande and a Mexican pizza, Maranatha, Lord Jesus. That would have been like, I could only imagine such wealth at my disposal that I could have those two things and even the cinnamon twists. Remember that styrofoam with cinnamon and sugar on it? That we were convinced was good after you've eaten something that's probably still in your system to this day. But that's what wealth does. It deceives you into thinking the good life is on the far side of the menu that you never get to go to. The good life that you want, that's where you get to do what you want to do. It's independence, it's freedom, it's autonomy. I'm not tied down. I can go where I want. I can vacation there if I want to. I can buy that car if I want to. I can purchase those clothes if I want to. I think James is teaching us, especially there at the end of chapter 4, be careful, you who say that, because your life is a vapor. And it looks like freedom, and it looks like autonomy, but it can suck you into a lifestyle that's ultimately a trap. Secondly, James teaches us here, I think, that the dangers of wealth also is related to accumulation. Or, as I would say, wealth as a means to security and safety. Look back again in verses 1 through 3. Come now, he says, you rich people, weep and wail over the miseries that are coming on you. Your wealth has rotted and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you and will eat your flesh like fire. What's James saying? Saying that these folks have amassed so much stuff that the moths are eating their clothes and their their silver and their gold is beginning to corrode. And it looks like a means for them to get safety or to get security. They know they'll always have enough because their storehouses are always filled up. James says, instead of that being something that you think you can take with you, you think can define you, instead it becomes evidence on the day of judgment that testifies against you. It says God had given you these resources and he had blessed you with these things, and yet you sat on them as a means to get more security or more safety for yourself, and then it begins to corrode, and then it begins to be eaten away. I watched a documentary several years ago, I think, on the Colombian drug lords of the 80s that kind of monetized cocaine. Pablo Escobar, I think, was one of them. And in the story, they were talking about when the DEA came and busted them, they went and found these storehouses where they'd put all of their cash. And they discovered that the rodents, the rats and the mice, were eating millions of dollars every year, just chewing it up. And they had so much money that they couldn't even conceive of doing something else with it. Just let it be eaten by rodents. That's sort of the imagery that James gives of what happens to a people when they build up these storehouses, build up their wealth and their resources, and just sit on it. It begins to corrode. The moths come in and eat all your clothes. In this way, James is just articulating what his brother taught him when Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Who of you by worrying can add a single day to your lifespan? Why do you worry about what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear? Look at the lilies of the field. Look at the birds of the air. They're clothed in more splendor than Solomon had in his most gloriously wealthy days. And yet here you are worrying about these things. Don't do it. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added unto you." James is telling us, look, you're never going to accumulate enough where you go, okay, there it is. That's security. Okay, there's finally enough zeros on that statement where I know that I can sleep at night. Why will that never happen? Because if you've lived any length of time, you watch the news any days at all, you know that entire governments topple. The market is fluctuating like crazy day in and day out. Decisions are made in a faraway land you have zero control over that may take all of it away tomorrow. You'll never accrue enough to get the safety or the security that you think you want. And James says if you don't recognize that, it's a danger. Wealth can be dangerous this way. Third, this one's kind of interesting. The way I define it is just indifference. Wealth can be dangerous when it makes us indifferent, or when wealth becomes a means to apathy or escape. When we have so much, we feel like we can disassociate from the problems around us because it's not really our problem anymore. And James says that it looks specifically like injustice. So back in verse 4, he says it like this: "Look, the pay that you withheld from the workers who mowed your fields cries out, and the outcry of the harvesters has reached the ears of the Lord of armies." Now that word, Lord of armies, is often translated in the Old Testament, Lord of hosts. And whenever God is given that designation, it's not good news because it means that he's coming against his people. So James says that there can come a time where if we give ourselves over to the pursuit of wealth or materialism, where we stop caring about the downstream effects of our decision-making, specifically as it pertains to corruption or to injustice. Where we can find ourselves in a place where we own enough stuff that we no longer care about the outcomes of that. And I'll be honest, y'all, I think that what James says here in verse 4, it was dangerous in his day. It is infinitely more dangerous in our day. Because in his day, if you defrauded your harvester, you probably had to look them in the eye at some point in time. In our day and age, in a capitalistic world like the one that we mostly live in and occupy these days, we can send injustice so far downstream, we never even have to see it. We don't have to deal with it. The toxic waste that is the result of our purchasing power goes in someone else's backyard, and we're never going to have to look anyone in the eye who has to struggle with that. That's dangerous. And James is not saying, hey, evaluate every purchase down to the minutia so that you make sure that all the boxes are checked. He's saying, look, you got to care about it. You got to open your eyes to it. You got to be aware of it. If at the end of this line of purchases there is oppression or theft or marginalization or genocide, consider that and make decisions then accordingly, wisely. Now, unfortunately, in our world that's broken and marred by sin, virtually any purchase or any decision you make financially is probably going to have some string attached to it that winds up being corrupted in some way. And I'm not telling you to get stuck on some cycle of incessant navel gazing that makes it to where you grieve over every purchase or every decision you have to make. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying care. That's what James is telling you here. Because if we don't, the injustice cries out against us. The accounting will be had on the day of judgment, he says. So open our eyes to it. Indifference is not an option. And earning enough to where you feel like you're free to do that is a danger that could trip us all up. Fourth, the danger of extravagance. So James says it like this at the first half of verse 5. You have lived luxuriously on the earth and have indulged yourself. The way that wealth is dangerous with extravagance is that wealth becomes a means to status or to superiority. The things that I purchase differentiate me from the masses. The brands that I represent give me a leg up on my competition. The way that I conduct myself in the world, it gives me VIP status. It opens doors. And so wealth then can become this unending pursuit of getting more, not to have more, but to be different or better. Now, I've been doing pastoral ministry for over 20 years now, I guess. I've been here almost 19. I've lived long enough to see good Christian folks, just like the ones James is writing to here, get stuck on this cycle of pursuing wealth, not for the sake of having more stuff, but just for opening more doors. And in the name of opportunity or in the name of advancement, get hooked on that like a drug. And it can become an unending cycle where you can justify virtually any decision that you make by saying, well, look at the access I'm going to have. Look at the doors that it opens. Look at what I'm going to be able to leverage one day, only to be sucked in and caught off guard by the danger associated with this. And James says, whenever that happens, you're fattening your heart for the day of slaughter. And the warning at the very end is crazy. Just like he did a couple weeks ago when he called the church adulterers. Now he says you're murderers. That the logical outcome of the pursuit of wealth and status means that people are going to die. Just take it very seriously. Hear the whistle. Straighten up and consider these things. It's dangerous. Fifth, finally, James shows us to think the danger of wealth as indulgence, or wealth as just a means to comfort and satisfaction. You have indulged yourself. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You've condemned others in the pursuit of those things. It's what the 7 deadly sins, I think, called gluttony and maybe avarice, this way of living that's just strictly hedonistic. I want to make enough money so that I can eat the foods I want to eat and go on the vacations I want to go on. Period. That's it. I want to have an escape hatch on my life that I can fund in perpetuity. That's what my pursuit of wealth is all about. I want to get what I want to get. I don't want to have to extend myself. I don't want to be exerted. I'm ashamed to say this today, but if you were to grab my phone and go through my social media feeds and look at the ads that befall me, the algorithm has nailed me. They show me places where you can sit and be unbothered by other people. And the only people who come to talk to you want to bring you things to eat. And it's selling me that all the time. It's showing me something about my heart, that the dangers of wealth for me, this is the one. This indulgent lifestyle where it's like, oh, I'm checking out. Where's the Ben & Jerry's? Everyone leave me alone for a while. This way of existence where you have enough money where you can cater to all your wants and desires. James says it's dangerous. And in a day and age where wealth and affluence seems like it's around every corner, if we're not careful, this is the treadmill we jump on and we never get off of. We never look out for the widow or the poor or the orphan in their distress. We're not keeping ourselves unstained from the ways of the world in a purely religious sense because we haven't paid attention to these potential dangers. We haven't heard the whistle. We haven't sobered up. We haven't taken it seriously. But today, if you want to do that, if you hear perhaps the beckoning of the Holy Spirit through conviction this morning to say, okay, I need to address some of these things because some of this is true in my own life. I keep thinking that one day a payday will hit where I will be secure, and it's yet to happen. I keep thinking that one day I'll have enough to where I'll feel like I am enough, and I've differentiated myself enough such that people look at me with respect and honor. One day I'll have enough where I don't have to care. If any of those fit for you today, what's the alternative? I love the way James does this. He doesn't say, okay, so become really super frugal, clip all the coupons, eat all the cold cuts, and then you'll be acceptable to God. That's not what he says. go after patience. The antidote to this particular materialistic lifestyle, this hedonistic lifestyle, it is not just shrinking things back. It's going for a virtue. And the virtue that he names is patience. Verse 7, therefore, brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. In other words, the dangers of wealth trip us up when we get impatient, when we want the things that are only going to exist in a new heaven and a new earth for eternity, when we want them now, even if it's just temporary. Even though we're just a vapor. We want a taste of heaven right now as much as we can possibly get, and we're not patient to wait for the Lord's coming. We're not waiting for, as James says, both of the rains that come in due season. Verse 8, you must be patient. Strengthen your hearts because the Lord's coming is near. Patience is fostered in anticipation, James tells us. By anticipating that Jesus will keep his word to us, that he will come again for us. And by looking towards that in a continual and ongoing increasing fashion, we actually begin to muster up patience in our own souls. And patience is the only way we jump off this treadmill. Patience is the only way we're not sucked into the vortex of these dangers of wealth. So in order to do that, James says, you've got to think. You've got to plug your minds into what Jesus has said is coming for you if you are his. And if you think about those things, then you'll realize everything that you think getting more wealth will give you is coming for free by grace when Jesus returns for us. You want security? I've got good news for you. There will be a new heaven and a new earth that will never pass away, where King Jesus will rule and reign forever. You want freedom? You think money will give you freedom? You're an adopted son or daughter of the Most High King, the Lion and the Lamb who bled in your place for your sins, who will redeem, renew, and restore, and he'll be with you forever. How can you get more free than that? You want to escape from suffering. You want to be indifferent to suffering. I got good news for you this morning. There will be no more mourning, weeping, or tears. In a new heaven and a new earth, it'll all be gone forever. It'll come untrue. You want status? Can you accrue more accolades and awards for yourself in this earth than you could get from standing at the feet of King Jesus, adopted? You want satisfaction? We're told we'll be fully and completely glorified, satisfied in a resurrected body ourselves forever. As you look forward to Christ's return, you grow your capacity to be patient. You learn that you can live without some things and not feel slighted or diminished in the process because what you have in Christ is better. You're storing up for yourself treasures in heaven, not on earth. And because of that, James tells us, patience produces perseverance in our life. Endurance, as we learned in chapter 1, is essential for spiritual maturity. James says, count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials of different sorts, because you know that in those trials, the testing of your faith produces endurance. And endurance, if you will allow it, will lead to spiritual maturity. And one of those ways that we mature is we begin to be a people who can persevere, who can deal with hard things, who don't have to shrink back or pivot anytime something challenging comes into our lives. When you look towards the Lord's coming, you are resourced with patience because you're able to endure. And you grow up in faith. I've used this illustration before, so forgive me if you've heard it, but imagine, if you will, two workers are enlisted to the most mind-numbingly boring and mundane job you can conceive of. Like when economists do this, they usually say they're making widgets. None of us knows what that is, but we'll go with it today. You're making widgets, and the making of a widget it feels like it's just taking the life out of you, and that's your job. But these two workers that are enlisted to this job, or who sign on for this job, one of them is promised at the end of a year, he'll be paid $100 for his widget production. $100 check at the end of the year, that's what you get whenever you made all the widgets, which means you'll be able to get a value meal at Taco Bell. And that's about what $100 will get you these days, but that's what he's got, right? The other employee, though, is promised at the end of his year of widget making, he's going to be paid $10 million. Okay? Do you think over the course of the year, those two workers will work differently? Absolutely, right? If you know that all of this boring, mind-numbing, arduous work is only going to get you a value menu item at Taco Bell, you're probably going to quit. If you don't quit, you're going to hate your job, maybe even hate your existence. But if at the end of this, you know you never have to work again, you're going to make widgets and whistle. You're going to find joy in it. Why? Because every day that you make another widget is another day that's in the rearview mirror, is another day closer to being able to retire, right? Because when you know the reward that is coming at the end, it changes the way you do the work. James is saying, be patient. Look to the Lord's second coming. Anticipate, long for, set yourself up to be considerate of that, because when you do so, you're not going to fall captive to the dangers of wealth, and you're going to develop perseverance in your own life. Not only that, James says that patience shows up and it begins to be manifested in your relationships. In fact, patience is always evidenced in relationships. I'm an entirely patient person if people don't deal with me. I don't encounter other people. I can be the most patient man on the planet. You put me around other people, particularly in traffic or in a line, I'm not so patient. And James says that's the way this works. This one, verse 9 seems like this outlier, but it fits right into the theme of pride and humility. Look again at verse 9. Brothers and sisters, do not complain about one another so that you will not be judged. Look, the judge stands at the door. Don't complain about other people. In other words, if you're walking around complaining about people perpetually, you're probably an impatient person. And in James's inventory of spiritual virtues and the spiritual life, that means you're also spiritually immature. The degree to which complaints hit your lips evidences the degree to which you probably got some growing to do. And it's the degree to which patience is yet to show up in your heart and life. Which means that you're probably going to fall prey to all the dangers of wealth. It's a fascinating idea. I mean, if you just do a quick inventory of the words that you said, can you believe she said that? Can you believe he did that? If there's always someone at the end of your criticism rope and you back that up, you're probably tempted to do some pretty disastrous things with your wealth as well. Why? It's all evidence of immaturity. I love the way that Tim Keller says it. He says, James is telling us that it is possible for us to possess a spirit of serenity, a spirit of quietness under any circumstances, a spirit of firmness and steadfastness. But he's also warning us against the spirit of restlessness, a spirit of irritability, a spirit of always complaining, always being unhappy, always being upset with the way things are and the way people are treating you. And this morning, one of the ways we may be set free from the trappings of wealth is just by simply growing in our ability to be patient with other people. James says the two are interrelated. And all of that is simply because patience is always grounded for us in the compassion and mercy of God. That's how James wraps a bow on this entire section. Verse 11, see, we count as blessed those who have endured. You have heard of Job's endurance and have seen the outcome that the Lord brought about. The Lord is compassionate and merciful. At the end of the day, our ability to avoid the dangers associated with wealth, our ability to be highly tolerant and patient with people that we encounter in a relationship, all spins on the fact of whether or not we really do believe that God is compassionate and merciful to us. Or maybe another way to say it is simply this: to the extent that we are convinced that I am accepted by God because of sheer mercy alone, not because of anything I've done, but because of what Christ has done for me. To the extent that I believe God is compassionate to me, not because I'm superior in righteousness or morality to my fellow humans, but because Christ lived for me, died for me, and rose again. To the extent that I really do believe that, all of these dangerous tentacles of wealth aren't going to grab me, because I have everything that those things are promising to me in Christ. And to the extent that I really believe that, I can be patient with you, because I didn't get in because I'm superior to you, and you're not going to get in because you're superior to me. We're both fellow sinners limping around in this experiment together. Do we trust Christ or do we not? To the extent that we see his compassion, to the extent that his mercy seeps down into our bones, we can give up our pursuit of these momentary good things. We can forego some pleasures. We can allow some temporary discomforts in. Like the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians, our light and momentary afflictions will be nothing in comparison to his glory. To the extent that we believe that, we're no longer on the treadmill of accumulate and consume, accumulate and consume, accumulate and consume. And we're free. We're free to look out for the distress that widows and orphans are encountering. We keep ourselves unstained from the world. So God, in this way, would you open our hearts to receive your grace once again, such that your compassion towards us in Jesus and your mercy that is unending towards us in Jesus would alter the way we handle our money, would change the way we view possessions, materialism. That we would look out for those who are affected by this. That we would see ways within which maybe corruption or fraud are leaking into our purchasing power, and we would do something about that. And even in light of that, God, we would become patient with one another in the process. Because it's all evidence of your goodness to us, the goodness that we celebrate, the goodness that gathers us around your table this morning and reminds us that we are brothers and sisters, bought with a price, given this all by sheer grace alone, in the person of Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen.